Well, let me ask you this though, because there's a bunch of stuff I want to unpack there. One, so when you're in the afterlife and you're finding your soul family, if you will, that's a term that's used a lot. The soul family of souls that you spirits or souls that you live with, they're not live with, but are like connected to.
Yeah.
Um, what does Swedenborg talk say about the concept of reincarnation and multiple lifetimes? Because that's the one thing that always caught me too in Christianity. I was like, so if I was born this a dude in of a certain color in a certain country, I would have either power or I would not have power, or I would have this experience or not that experience. And if I was born a
Yeah.
woman here, I was like, it always didn't make a whole lot of sense to me that you only had the one shot. This is just my personal opinion. And then when
Yeah.
I idea of reincarnation came in, I was like, that makes sense to me. What did he say?
Yeah. Well, I think that um, I like the idea of something that makes sense. So if you're saying, "Hey, this opens it up," so I don't want to argue against that. I will give you a possible alternative to reincarnation. That
Sure.
Swedenborg, because back in his day, I don't think that
Oh God,
reincarnation was.
a thing in
It wasn't
Western.
in Europe, in Western Europe. I don't think you had the
Mm-mm.
idea of that, but he does kind of offer a sort of solution to the idea of why do so many people experience past lives, sort of unprompted. Because
Right.
to him, okay, so spiritual world has a lot of characteristics to it,
Mhm.
and one of them is lack of time and space. One of them is the gravitation of love, but in the other one is the fluidity of mind. So there's a much more effortless transfer of information and feeling there. Here, we can talk. You and I can talk, and it can go into this microphone and go all the way through the servers and get there, and people can listen and then try to picture what it is I'm talking about. But there's a lot of people in near-death experiences will say, "Oh, I can
Mhm.
just tell what he was thinking. I got to download." There's
It's
like
instant. It's instant.
it's instant, it's permeable. Even Swedenborg says that actually, if you go into a community in the afterlife, you start to think sort of like they do. You're influenced by their. He talks about auras, like the sort of emanation of your life and mind going out from everyone. So you're able to do that, and you're also able to share feelings. He talks about people who are feeling a certain kind of joy being able to just really tangibly and directly pass it to somebody else and say, "Hey, check this out. Here's some joy that you can have." So there, and not only that, that we actually, while we're on the earth, are constantly surrounded by spirits because we actually couldn't have consciousness. The link of consciousness goes from the divine through the spiritual world, ends up in the physical world. So we're constantly surrounded by spirits. Actually, our spirit even now is traveling from community to community based on the way we change in our life. It's just a nice long way to get to the answer I want to give you, but I feel like I got to have this background here.
Mhm.
When with the reason why little kids are like they are, like why are they so spontaneous and open and joyful and free? It's a distinctly different phase from what I remember of it than what we have now, is because when you're little, your spirit is around those celestial angels or the deepest angels that Sweden talks about. As you grow up, your spirit changes and it starts to go around more spiritual or intellect oriented angels. And you have to have that if you're going to be able to build a mind and grow. But the point is that your spiritual company changes what you experience. And there's enough permeability, so much so that Swedenborg just offhand in his book Heaven and Hell says that usually when your mind interacts with spirits, you do so out of your own memory. So that they don't bring in what they've experienced from their life into the interaction. They actually take on some of your memory and from there influence you in certain ways, hopefully to do what's good. Sometimes though, they're there's some the equivalent of a leak or something where you can actually experience someone else's memories as your own. So
Interesting.
it would be, yeah, so it would be like my wife's friend one time was describing to my wife and her friends, remember when we did this thing? Remember when you were over there and we went to this and we went to that? And they were
Mhm.
all trying to remember what she was talking about. And finally, they were like, oh no, that was an episode of Friends that you're talking about.
That
That
was
never
Phoebe. That
that
was
didn't
Phoebe.
that didn't happen. Like you think it happened. So that can the idea that you can get a feeling that you've been somewhere just even through the crudeness of media, but that there is the possibility for you to experience someone else's memories, and so you feel like I've lived that life. Now, to Swedenborg, it was like, no, it's like the womb. Like you develop in the womb for 9 months, and there you set up you don't set up who you're going to be, but you set up the basics, like the foundation of who you're going to be, and then you're born and you go and live your life. So
Mhm.
this life is like the womb to the spiritual world. So you don't define who you're going to be forever. Swedenborg is very clear that you continue to grow and change and do a lot of the stuff that I think we did this whole show called "Do We Reincarnate?" Because there's sort of like a yes and no, and that a lot of the aspects of like the cyclical development that people talk about in reincarnation, Swedenborg does describe, but he talks about it happening on the other side. He doesn't talk about you changing your entire personality, but at times you forget who you were and these kinds of things. But
Interesting.
yeah, so it's this interesting mix. But to him, it was this is the foundation point. That is to say, though, I do. Anytime someone's saying like, "Hey, I like reincarnation because it makes me think," yeah, that makes more sense that you'd have a shot at different things, and it brings me more toward love. Then I'm like, well, who knows? There could be something in it. So I don't feel like I want to say no. There's not reincarnation, even though I see a different possible alternative in the way Swedenborg describes it. I think the idea that we're both looking at, which is like, how would you really get it so you can empathize with people and not just and that everyone gets a fair shake at life. So there's got to be some truth that makes that happen.